I'd spent my whole life running from alphas, and that night they found me faster than I could blink. The engine screamed under my hands, the sound bouncing off wet concrete and rusted metal, turning the whole of Knox-Bend's industrial district into one big echo chamber. Neon signs smeared across my windshield in streaks of blue and pink, oil, slick colors on a city that never really slept, just twitched restlessly. I dropped a gear and took the corner too fast on purpose. The back wheels slid, kissed the edge of the guardrail, and for one perfect second the car hovered on the brink of disaster, then snapped back into the lane like gravity had a soft spot for me. I grinned under the black filter mask. "Come on, baby," I muttered to the steering wheel. Just a few more laps and we both lived to be irresponsible another day. The other racers were just headlights in my mirror now, a messy trail of white and red. I'd left them behind 3 turns ago. Not because my car was the strongest. It wasn't. It was held together by stolen parts, duct tape, and the unwavering belief that if I stopped, someone with a very good nose and very bad intentions would finally catch up. Freedom smelled like burnt rubber and gasoline. It also tasted like panic. My fingers flexed inside my gloves, tapping the wheel in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. Breathe in through the filter. Breathe out. Don't think about it. Don't think about them. Just. Something pricked the back of my neck. Not a dart. A feeling. That static hum. That sense of being watched from somewhere above. Like the sky had eyes. I stole a quick glance at the rearview mirror. Just the usual darkness, distant highway lights, industrial chimneys coughing out smoke into the night. And yet, my shoulders tensed. My instincts, the ones that had kept me alive this long, whispered one word: run. Already doing it, I said out loud, voice a little too sharp. I floored it anyway. The final straight of the makeshift track opened ahead, marked by a crooked row of cargo containers and a cluster of idiots cheering with phones held high. Knox-Bend's underground loved its illegal races. Fast cars, fast money, faster rumors. I was just another ghost behind the wheel to them. No one cared if I kept my mask on. Some thought it was a brand. Others thought I was dramatic. No one guessed it was a filter rated for alpha-grade pheromones. I crossed the chalked finish line first. The crowd roared. Fireworks, cheap ones, probably stolen, burst into the night above me, scattering sparks over the roofs. I should have slowed down. Taken the win. Let them slap my car, shove money into my hand, shout my alias. Instead, the hair on my arms stood up. There, at the edge of the lot. Headlights. Wrong angle. Wrong timing. Not racers. Not spectators. The road ahead cut between 2 abandoned warehouses. That had been my planned exit. The route I'd mapped that zigzagged through back alleys and broken fences until I could disappear into the city's belly again. Now, 3 black vehicles slid into that gap like puzzle pieces, perfectly aligned, perfectly silent. No engine roar, no screech of brakes. They just appeared. My stomach dropped. That's not good. The cars were matte black, windows tinted to oblivion. No logos, no plates I could make out in the strobe of neon and fireworks. But I knew the type. Government. Or something worse. Someone stepped out of the lead car. Tall. Broad shoulders. Mask with mirrored lenses that flashed silver when the fireworks reflected off them. Spectre. I slammed on the brakes so hard the car fishtailed, the smell of burning rubber thick and sharp. The crowd's noise turned from excitement to confusion, then to fear as more of them noticed the newcomers. Spectre units moved like shadows given orders, smooth, synchronized, no wasted motion. 3 more poured out of the other cars, their gear clean and compact, not like the bulky riot suits regular enforcement wore. These were the kind that didn't expect to miss. Okay, I muttered, heart pounding against my ribs. Too fast even for me. I yanked the wheel, trying to spin the car around, shoot back the other way. But a 4th vehicle had cut off my rear, sliding into place without so much as a skid. The industrial lot that had felt huge a minute ago now felt like a cage. The first Spectre officer raised a hand. The air changed. My pulse spiked, instinct screaming. Cornered. No exits. No alley narrow enough. No rooftop close enough. Even if I tried to climb, they'd have me in seconds. Unless... Fine. If they were alphas, and I'd bet my engine they were. I still had 1 card left to play. I closed my eyes for half a breath, and dropped the tight mental grip I kept on my body. The control I'd trained into myself since I was old enough to understand what I was. Heat pulsed under my skin. My glands flared. The scent rolled out from me in a hot, invisible wave, sweet, sharp, dangerously concentrated. The kind of pheromones that sent normal alphas straight into a feral edge, tearing at their leashes, ripping through orders, hierarchy, and good sense. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of the crowd. People staggered, a few alphas doubling over, faces flushed, eyes wide. Someone swore. Someone else laughed in that hysterical way people did when they were about to lose control. Good. Great. Perfect. Now the Spectre officers would not move? They didn't falter. Not a step. Not a twitch. They kept walking toward my car in that same unhurried, precise formation. Boots whispering against the concrete. The one in front tilted his head, as if analyzing a particularly persistent stain on the floor. What? Cold slid down my spine, cutting through the heat. I pushed harder, letting the pheromones spike to the point where my muscles trembled with it. This close, with this concentration, even a high-ranked alpha should have felt it. Should have struggled. Should have shown something. They showed nothing. My breath hitched behind the mask. No way, I whispered. What are you? My vision blurred for a second, the backlash of output making the edges of the world go soft. I'd overdone it. Rookie mistake. For a guy who'd built his entire survival strategy on never overdoing it. The lead Spectre officer stopped a couple of feet from my car door. Even through the tinted window, I could feel his gaze like pressure. The door handle clicked. Hands grabbed me, gloved, firm, unshakably steady. Not rough, not cruel. Just final. My seatbelt was cut, my wrist caught before I could swing. My legs buckled when they hauled me out. The concrete under my boots felt too far away and too close all at once. The night spun. Voices bled together. Muffled commands, radio static. Someone shouting to clear the crowd. My vision tunneled, trying to lock onto something, anything that made sense. Then, I heard him. Low, calm, with a command threaded through every syllable like steel through velvet. Bring him to me. The words slid under my skin, past the chemical chaos, past the fear. My body went still in spite of myself. I didn't see his face that night. But I knew, with the same certainty I knew how to hit a corner at 80, that the owner of that voice had just ended the longest race of my life. And I hadn't even crossed the finish line. The boy was still unconscious when they brought him in. He lay on the narrow bed in the center of the observation room, the sterile white walls reflecting, the overhead lights until the whole space looked like it had been carved from ice. Even asleep, he radiated the kind of energy that made the air feel charged, volatile, unpredictable, too bright for a place like this. And I stood behind the one-way glass, hands clasped behind my back, trying to convince myself that looking at him this long was a tactical decision. It wasn't. My eyes kept drifting to the line of his throat, to the way his dark hair stuck to his temple with sweat, to the faint tremor in his fingers as whatever drugs the med team had used wore off. His mask was gone. Without it, he looked younger. Too young for how fast he drove, for how recklessly he fought to escape. Too young to be carrying a mutation that dangerous. I exhaled slowly, keeping the sound silent, controlled. Always controlled. That was the one rule of my life. The rule that built my reputation, my unit, my authority. An alpha who loses control stops being a leader and becomes a weapon. And weapons get put down. Control wasn't optional for me, which is why what I felt now was unacceptable. The resonance had started the moment his scent hit the air in the lot, sharp as electricity and twice as fast. Alpha instincts should have surged. My mind should have fogged. My pulse should have snapped into that familiar feral rhythm. It didn't. Instead, everything sharpened. The noise. The movement. The color of the boy's eyes before he blacked out, storm gray, wide with panic and defiance. Clarity, that's what he brought. Not frenzy. Not loss of reason. Clarity so intense it felt like stepping out of darkness into unfiltered daylight. A pair. The conclusion was instant, instinctive, undeniable. A recognition that vibrated along a frequency deeper than thought. And I rejected it just as fast. No. Absolutely not. Sir. Dr. Shawe approached my side, her voice appropriately low. Vitals are stable. No physical injuries beyond strain from exertion. I didn't take my eyes off the boy. Sedation level? Wearing off. He'll wake soon. Good. My voice sounded steady, the one thing I could rely on. No one touches him. No physical contact unless I authorize it. She blinked. Even for standard checks? Especially for standard checks. A brief hesitation. She wasn't used to having an order she didn't understand. May I ask why? No. That ended it. She bowed her head and stepped away. When the door slid shut behind her, I let myself breathe again. Pairs were rare. For someone like me, someone whose biology had been shaped by conditioning, training, and decades of total restraint, the idea of a bond, of letting another person access the places in me that were locked, so tightly they might as well have been welded shut, was dangerous. More dangerous than the boy's mutation. More dangerous than any mission I'd ever accepted. Losing control meant death. I'd known that since I was old enough to follow orders. Yet this Omega didn't make me lose control. He made me aware. Hyper-aware. Acute. Present. As if every part of me had been dormant until he breathed the same air I did. That made him infinitely more threatening. I lifted my hand and tapped the display embedded in the wall panel. Security, I said. The mic picked up my voice instantly. A chime. Yes, Director Rains? Establish a level 4 observation grid. Full visual coverage, blind spot compensation, round-the-clock monitoring. Yes, sir? And, I added, institute a quarantine protocol. He is to be told he's being held for medical evaluation of a possible contaminant exposure. A brief pause. Understood. Research quarantine? No. My voice hardened. Make it sound temporary. If he believed he was a patient, not a prisoner, he'd be less likely to run at the first opportunity. He'd still run, of course. Anyone with eyes could see that the boy was a born escape artist. But a soft cage was better than a hard one. Less damage to the walls. Less damage to him. He shifted in the bed, breath catching in his throat. His fingers curled weakly, as if reaching for something he could never quite hold. I felt the pull again, that wrong, unmistakable tug in my chest. The instinct to step forward, to open the door, to touch the back of his hand and reassure him before he even woke. I didn't move. Instead, I did the only thing that guaranteed stability. I locked the door controls with my personal authorization code. Distance, boundaries, control. He was safer that way. And so was I. But as I turned to leave the observation deck, my reflection in the glass caught up with me, a tall alpha with perfect posture and perfectly composed features staring back. Behind him, behind me, the Omega slept in a room too white, too cold. And clarity whispered something unwelcome in the back of my mind. You didn't close the door because he's dangerous. You closed it because you are. Waking up in a strange room isn't new for me. Waking up in a strange room with all the exits sealed and the air smelling like disinfectant and expensive institutional paranoia. Yeah, that part's new. My eyes snapped open to a ceiling light that was way too bright, the kind that made you wonder if the designers hated human retinas. I pushed myself upright, ignoring the dizziness clawing at the back of my skull. Drugs. Mild, regulated. Government grade. I was in a rectangular white cell that pretended to be a medical room. Bed with a thin mattress. Metal chair. Sink. Door with no handle, great for ambiance if you're into the whole voluntary imprisonment look. And of course, the camera in the upper corner, glossy, black, staring at me like a lazy cyclops. Perfect. I stretched my hands over my head, rolled my shoulders, popped my neck. Assess, evaluate, escape. 3 steps, burned into my survival instincts. The walls? Reinforced. The air vents? Too small even for me. The door? Controlled from the outside. Weak points? The camera. The people watching behind it. Always go for the people. A woman in scrubs entered first, holding a tablet. Behind her, a man in lightweight black tactical gear. Not bulky armor. Sleek, minimalistic, expensive. He stood like a statue, his eyes hidden behind gradient lenses. Spectre again. Great. Good morning, the woman said in a rehearsed tone. I'm Dr. Ishawe. How do you feel? Kidnapped, I said cheerfully. She didn't react. The guard didn't even blink. I clicked my tongue. Wow. Tough crowd. We need to run a few standard checks, she continued. Neurological response, vitals, coordination. You were exposed to... I'm not answering questions. I wasn't asking one. I smirked. Cute. You rehearsed that in the mirror? The guard remained motionless. Most alphas stiffened, shifted their weight, got annoyed, got something. This guy was like a decorative rock someone had propped in the corner. Fine. I could work with that. I tugged off the blanket and swung my legs over the side of the bed. Since I'm clearly not here voluntarily, how about you tell me where? No, the guard said. Flat. Unbothered. No. I echoed. That's the whole answer? Just no? Wow, you're fun at parties. Still nothing. I narrowed my eyes. This wasn't normal. At this range, even with mild output, alphas usually showed something. A flicker. A muscle twitch. Their pupils dilating. Their breath catching. My mutation didn't give people options. Except these people. Dr. Ishawi stepped closer with her scanner. I stepped back. She sighed. I'm trying to help you, Mr. Don't bother guessing. I'm not giving you a name. We have it on file. Oh? I arched a brow. Then you don't need to talk to me at all. Lucky you. The guard almost shifted his stance. A fraction of a movement. Not a reaction to my pheromones though. Just annoyance. I filed that away. Fine, I said with a dramatic sigh. If we're doing this, let's make it entertaining. I took a slow step forward, letting my body language turn loose, fluid. I smiled in a way that had made grown alphas forget their own addresses. I tilted my head, lowered my voice, let my tone warm in that dangerous velvet-edged way. If these people wanted to keep a monster in a box, I was happy to remind them what kind of monster I could be. The doctor didn't react. The guard didn't react. Nothing. Not a blush. Not a stutter. Not even an increased heartbeat. My smile faltered. Just barely. Huh. The doctor typed something. Probably subject displays excessive sarcasm. She gestured at the bed. Please sit. The tests are mandatory. Are you always this charming? I said, or is it just me? Mandatory, she repeated. Yeah, okay. That was enough playing nice. My gaze cut to the camera in the corner. Dark lens. Silent. Watching. Someone was behind it. Someone who thought I would cooperate just because he hadn't spoken yet. Well, if he wanted a show. I tilted my chin up, looking straight into the camera, feeling my pulse settle. Into that quiet, reckless rhythm that always preceded my bad decisions. Hey big boss, I drawled. You're watching, right? You don't even want to talk to me? Or are you just scared? The air in the room tightened. Not from anyone moving, but from the absence of movement. The doctor stopped typing. The guard's jaw flexed once, barely visible. A hit. Oh, someone had definitely been watching. Good. I leaned closer to the camera, lowering my voice. Come on. You went through all the trouble of catching me. At least say hi. Silence. Except. Not silence. I felt something. A prickle at the back of my neck. A presence. Focused. Heavy. Controlled in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. Whoever he wasn't normal. I stepped back, masking the tiny spike of unease with another smirk. Didn't think so. The doctor cleared her throat. Mister, please sit. We really do need you stable before Director Rain. The guard's hand twitched. The doctor bit her lip and fell silent. Director Rain. So the big boss had a name. Interesting. I let myself sag back onto the bed, just to stop their fussing. But my mind was racing faster than my heartbeat. Something was wrong with this place. With these people. With their lack of reaction to my scent. I kept my eyes on the camera. Whoever Rain was, I'd gotten under his skin. Not much, but enough. And I wasn't done. Not until I figured out why these alphas weren't collapsing around me like everyone else. Not until I figured out why. And this was the worst part. I felt like he was the one watching me, not the other way around. Rain. Soft isolation is the polite term. Containment with better lighting is the truth. Protocol S3, I told the staff, hands behind my back as the orders rolled out of me like they always did. Measured, precise, absolute. Limited mobility. Medical access only. Daily vitals and neurological tests. No external contact. All doors on remote override. A chorus of affirmations followed. Efficient. Predictable. Perfect. Except nothing felt perfect anymore. I watched through the one-way glass as they explained the new restrictions to him. The boy, Sam, according to his records, sat on the edge of the bed, jaw tight, fingers digging into the mattress as if the fabric had offended him personally. He looked smaller today. Not physically. Something else. Like he'd been built for motion, for velocity, and now someone had clipped his wings. His knee bounced. His eyes darted from wall to door. Instinctive search for exits. His breathing hitched. A warning sign. I felt the ache in my chest, the pull again. Sharp enough to make my fingers curl involuntarily. I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't let the mask slip. Control was survival. Control was everything. Still, watching him tremble under fluorescent light was an irritation so deep it bordered on pain. The nurse gave him the final explanation. The door remains locked unless a staff member escorts you. It's for your safety. He flinched at the word locked, and something inside me cracked so faintly I almost missed it. Sam, I don't do locked doors. The moment she said the word, my lungs shrank. The walls leaned in. My vision tightened. No, I rasped, stepping back without realizing it. No, absolutely not. The nurse held up her hands, patient, rehearsed. Mr. Sam, don't Mr. Sam me. My throat closed around the words. Open the door. It's just temporary. Click. The door sealed. I heard the mechanism lock, a quiet, efficient sound. My heart jumped to my throat. Open it, I repeated. I hated the shake in my voice. Hated that I couldn't hide it. Now, the guard shifted his weight. The nurse tried again, gentler. You're safe. The director. I don't care about the director, I snapped, backing into the wall. I said, open. My palms were sweating. My skin prickled. My breath came short and fast. Too fast. Panic clawed up my ribs like a living thing. I pressed my shoulder against the wall, grounding myself in the cold. Too bright. Too white. Too closed. No windows. No exits. No air. For years I'd kept my claustrophobia buried under adrenaline. Under engines. Under speed. But here, there was nowhere to run. Open the door, I whispered, barely able to hear myself. Please. No one moved. Someone was watching though. I could feel it. Heavy. Focused. Through the damn camera. I lifted my head, staring straight into the lens. You think this is going to make me cooperate? I hissed. The room didn't answer. The people inside it didn't answer. But someone on the other side of that glass heard every word. I sank to my knees, hating it, hating myself, hating the walls that felt like hands closing around my throat. Please, I breathed again. Not proud. Not strong. Just human. And that was the worst feeling of all. Rain. He was unraveling. Not dramatically. Not theatrically. Just quietly, like a flame starved of oxygen. His palms pressed flat against the wall, fingers trembling. His knees hit the floor. His breath fractured in short bursts, and the air in the observation deck thickened with something I didn't have a name for. Fear, yes. His, mine. I felt it. Sharp, visceral, primal. Not the urge to dominate, to take, to mark. Those weren't the instincts rising in me. Something older. Rarer. The instinct to steady. To open the door. To touch his wrist. To tell him he wasn't trapped. My hand lifted before I realized it. I stopped it midair, curled it into a fist, grounding myself in the bite of my own nails. No physical intervention, I reminded myself under my breath. No proximity, no breaches. Rules protect people. Control protects everyone. If I went in there, he'd cling to me. If he clung, I'd lose clarity. If I lost clarity, no. Instead, I used the intercom. Doctor, I said quietly. Give him breathing assistance. Keep him grounded verbally. No contact. Yes, director. They moved quickly. A chair. Soft words. A mask with regulated oxygen. And I watched. The entire time, a wall between us. A wall I'd built. A wall he hated. A wall neither of us could cross. His breathing slowed, barely. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve, angry at himself for the weakness. He tilted his chin up, defiant even in fear. My chest tightened again. Clarity, sharp and unwelcome, whispered. You didn't put him behind a door to keep him safe. You put the door there because if you stepped inside, you wouldn't want to leave. Sam. 10 minutes later, I was breathing normally again. Not calmly. Just not dying. Which counted. The nurse asked a few more questions I didn't answer. The guard watched me like I was a potential bomb. He wasn't wrong. Then they left. The door locked behind them. I sat alone, staring at the camera, jaw tight. I'm not staying, I whispered. I don't care whose rules these are. I didn't sign anything. The camera didn't move. But I felt it. Someone behind it. Reacting. A crack in their armor. Good. Let it crack. Because I didn't care how many walls they built between us. I was already planning how to break every single one. I've never believed in waiting for opportunity. If you want out, you make it. And in this pristine, over-engineered prison disguised as a medical wing, the vents were practically begging me to try. The moment the night shift rotated out and the lights dimmed to institutional bedtime, I moved. Quiet. Calm. Purposeful. The kind of calm that only exists right before you do something incredibly stupid. I dragged the chair beneath the air vent, climbed up, and ran my fingers along the grate. Reinforced. Screwed in from the outside. But the screws weren't flush. Amateurs. I dug my fingernails under the metal and yanked with everything I had. Pain shot down my fingers, but the grate popped loose with a metallic crack that echoed louder than I liked. For a breathless second, I froze, listening. Nothing. Good. I hoisted myself up into the vent, pulled the grate in behind me, and began crawling. The space was barely wide enough for my shoulders, and the metal bit into my knees as I moved, but this was still infinitely better than sitting obediently in a locked room pretending I wasn't suffocating. The air in the tunnel smelled of dust and industrial coolant. Dim indicator lights blinked along the wall, guiding me forward like half-hearted stars. After 3 minutes I reached the junction. After 4, I found the grate that opened into a maintenance corridor. After 5 I was already imagining the look on the big boss's face when they found an empty bed and a loose vent. Freedom tasted so close. At 6 minutes the alarm went off. A soft chime at first. Then a louder one. Then a clinical voice echoed through the ducts. Unauthorized movement detected in Sector C. Initiating lockdown. I froze. Seriously? I hissed. 6 minutes? That's cheating. I hurried down the tunnel, pushing faster, ignoring the scrape of metal against my elbows. I kicked out the next grate and dropped into the maintenance corridor with a roll that barely hurt. Well, hurt less than it could have. Then I heard footsteps. Slow. Measured. Certain. No running. No shouting. Just presence. I straightened as he came into view. The director. Rain. He walked toward me like he had all the time in the world. Like he'd predicted every step I would take. His expression was unreadable, the faint reflection of the corridor's lights sliding across the angles of his face. His eyes caught the dim glow, cold steel, sharp and clear. I inhaled sharply. And that's when I smelled him. Not the way other alphas smelled, heavy, hot, clawing at your mind like a hook. No. His scent was cold, clean, precise, sharp like winter air. And underneath it, something quiet, stabilizing. A scent that didn't make my instincts panic, but settle. I hated it. I hated the way it cut through the chemical harshness of the corridor. I hated the way my pulse slowed, not sped up. I hated the way it made me feel safe. Safe around an alpha. That wasn't possible. That wasn't real. I backed up a step immediately. No, I muttered under my breath. Absolutely not. Rain stopped a few feet away, hands behind his back, posture annoyingly perfect. I forced myself to meet his eyes. You're not keeping me here. His blink was slow, almost patient. You left your room. That triggered the lockdown. You're not keeping me, I repeated, voice sharper. The doors, he said calmly, close automatically. Automatically? I scoffed. Right. And the keys automatically teleport into your hand. His eyes flicked to my dirt-smudged fingers. You injured yourself removing the vent cover. That doesn't answer the question. Neither did you. God, he was insufferable. We stared at each other, air thick with tension I didn't understand, and absolutely didn't want to explore. Rain took 1 step closer. I took 2 steps back. He didn't raise a hand. Didn't threaten. Didn't even frown. But the pressure of his presence filled the hallway like a physical force, pushing at me until my back brushed the wall. Come, he said. Not a command. Not exactly. More like a gravitational pull shaped into a word. You need to return. I laughed. Sharp, angry, too loud in the narrow space. You think you can just walk in here and... He moved. Not fast. Just decisively. 1 second I was glaring at him, the next his hand was hovering near. My elbow, not touching, just close enough to guide without force. A gesture so impossibly gentle that for a heartbeat I forgot I was supposed to fight. My chest tightened. I jerked away from the warmth of his nearness. "Don't touch me." "I didn't," he said quietly. That made it worse. Because he could have. He could have grabbed me, dragged me, dominated me. Any other alpha would have. But he didn't lay a finger on me. Which meant I had no excuse for why my stomach flipped the way it did. He stepped back half a pace. Enough space to breathe, not enough space to run. "Sam," he said softly, and hearing my name in his voice almost made me flinch. "You're not a prisoner," he continued. "But this facility isn't safe for you to wander." I glared at him. "Then let me out." His expression didn't change. No. My fists clenched. My pulse hammered. The walls felt closer than before, but not because the hallway was narrow, because he was close. Rain angled his head toward the elevator at the end of the hall. "Come with me," he repeated. And damn it. The way he said it made it sound less like an order, and more like inevitability. I hated that too. I followed. Not because I wanted to, but because he walked ahead of me like he already knew I would. There are few things in life I trust. Engines, open roads, and the fact that my scent can drop an alpha to their knees in under 5 seconds. Here, only 2 of those seemed to still apply. The next 3 days were a blur of tests, blood draws, neurological scans, motion assessments. They hooked me up to more machines than I'd seen outside a racing garage. Electrodes, sensors, monitors. Every inch of my skin felt like it had a sticky pad attached to it. All while cameras tracked my every breath. They had cameras in the corners, cameras in the hallways, cameras in the ceiling vents. I swear if I sneezed, someone took notes about airflow and trajectory. And through all of it, nothing. No reactions, no flushed cheeks, no tremors, no ragged breathing from the alphas monitoring my vitals. Every person here was built like they'd been printed from a government lab catalog. Tall, broad, strong. Perfectly conditioned alphas whose instincts should have tripped the moment my scent broke containment. But when the doctor accidentally brushed my wrist with her glove, the alpha guard at the door didn't even blink. When a tech leaned in too close, inhaled directly near my neck while adjusting some sensor, he didn't sway, didn't stumble, didn't react at all. That was the part that crawled under my skin. Fine. The guards could have been trained, conditioned, on suppressants. I could have explained that away. But then there was him, Rain. The first time he stepped into the testing room, the atmosphere shifted. Not in the usual alpha way, overbearing aggression, pressure, dominance. No. It shifted like someone had cracked a window in a suffocating room. Cool. Quiet. Clear. His scent brushed the edges of mine like frost against fire. And every single time, my body reacted before my brain did. A stumble in my pulse. Heat pooling low in my stomach. A tightening in my chest I absolutely refused to acknowledge. So I hid it. I forced my breathing steady, clenched my jaw, and pretended the monitors weren't tracking everything. I kept my hands in my pockets when he spoke, so he wouldn't see the way my fingers trembled. I kept my eyes away from his because every time I looked, something inside me tilted. And that was not an option. He was here again today, standing by the wall while the med team extracted yet another vial of my blood. His posture perfect, as always. His expression unreadable, as if he could stand motionless for hours without the slightest discomfort. I stared at the needle in my arm, then at him. Finally, the question ripped out of me. "Why aren't you afraid?" Rain didn't look up. Of what? Of me. That got his attention. Slowly, he lifted his gaze. Those silver steel eyes landed on me like a weight, not crushing, just steady, irritatingly calm. "I'm not afraid of you," he said simply. Exactly. I tried to laugh, but it came out tight and too sharp. That's the weird part. He said nothing. I leaned forward on the exam table, lowering my voice. "Do you know what happens to alphas around me? Real alphas? They shake, they sweat, they lose themselves, they break rank, they—" "None of my people are breaking," he interrupted quietly. "That's my point." I hissed. "Why aren't they? Why aren't you?" His jaw shifted almost imperceptibly, one of the only tells I'd seen him show. "I'm not your experiment," I said. "And if something about me suddenly stopped working, I deserve to know." "There's nothing wrong with you," Rain said. "Then why?" "You're not broken," he repeated, softer this time. That softness got under my ribs like a blade. I felt it in places I'd spent years locking shut. I swallowed hard and forced the next words out. Then answer the question. His gaze flicked to the window, as if contemplating the fastest escape route. For someone who gave orders that moved entire teams, he suddenly looked unsure. I won't discuss operational protocols, he said finally. My heart dropped like a stone. That's not an answer, I whispered. It's the answer I can give. His voice didn't waver, but something in the air did. A tension. A hesitation. Something he wasn't saying. Something he was afraid to say. Later, back in my room, I paced in tight circles. Back and forth. Back and forth. The walls weren't closing in this time. My own thoughts were. What if the truth was simple? What if this wasn't a glitch, or a training technique, or some suppressant the guards were on? What if there was finally someone my pheromones couldn't touch? Someone even my body responded to. The thought terrified me. Not because it made me weak, but because it made me feel seen. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling my heartbeat stutter at the memory of his scent brushing mine. Cold. Clean. Steadying. What if I found someone I can't break? I whispered to the empty room. And worse. What if I don't want to? The cameras told me he was asleep long before I reached his door. Sleep came to him unevenly, light, guarded, as if even unconsciousness was something he had to negotiate rather than surrender to. He shifted often. His breathing changed pattern with the slightest sound. Even sedated, he watched the world with his nerves. And yet tonight, he was still. Curled on his side, one arm tucked beneath his head, the thin blanket tangled around his legs. His dark hair fell over his forehead in uneven strands. His mask lay on the floor beside the bed. He must have pulled it off in his sleep. I entered the room silently. The lock disengaged with a muted click, and the air inside shifted, responding to the presence of two scents instead of one. His, bright and volatile even when dormant, and mine, cold and controlled. He didn't stir. For a man who'd spent his whole life running, he looked disarmingly vulnerable like this. Too vulnerable. I closed the door behind me and stood at the edge of the bed, my shadow falling across his shoulder. In the dark, under softer lights, the bruises on his wrists were more apparent. Faint purple shadows, left from restraints during intake, despite all my instructions to handle him with care. A mistake. One I'd already corrected. But seeing it again stirred something unpleasant beneath my ribs. Anger. Guilt. Instinct. None of which I could afford. My hand lifted before I could stop it. Foolish. The back of my fingers hovered just inches above his wrist, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin radiating upward. Close enough that one more breath, one more impulse, could collapse every rule I'd ever lived by. His breathing hitched, barely. A sleep twitch. Or something else. I froze. The urge to touch him, a simple human gesture, felt like a cliff edge. The slightest lean forward and I would fall. His scent was softest when he slept, muted at the edges, stripped of its defensive sharpness. Instead of chaos, it carried quiet. Warmth, not submission, not dominance. Something entirely separate from instinct. It pressed into the cold places inside me like a hesitant knock on a locked door. My hand trembled. Not visibly, no one else would have noticed. But I felt the tremor down to my bones. The first fracture in my control. Unacceptable. I withdrew my hand sharply, curling my fingers into my palm until the knuckles protested. Pain helped. Anchored me. I exhaled through my nose to steady the tremor in my chest. He mumbled something and shifted onto his back, exposing the long line of his throat. His pulse fluttered beneath pale skin, a delicate beat that drew my eyes like a gravitational pull. Pairs weren't chosen. Pairs were recognized. In one look. One breath. One heartbeat. His matched mine. Too perfectly. I leaned closer, despite myself. Close enough that my voice wouldn't carry beyond this room, beyond the secret weight hanging between us. Sam. I whispered, the name tasting too intimate on my tongue. You have no idea how dangerous you are to me. He didn't move. Didn't open his eyes. Didn't know. Good. Because if he did, if he saw how thin my composure truly was, he would run again. And I wasn't sure I would let him. There are a lot of things you can buy with charm. And the cheapest currency in this facility? Chocolate. Specifically, the smuggled kind, foil wrapped, too expensive for a junior tech's salary, and apparently irresistible, when handed over with a smile that suggested we were Kyo conspirators instead of inmate and staff. The kid, barely older than me, nervous, acne scars, too soft heart, blushed so hard I thought he might faint. You really shouldn't, he whispered, looking at the chocolate bar as though it were evidence. Oh, I know, I whispered back. Terrible idea, absolutely reckless. Maybe even life-ruining. He swallowed. But, I added, leaning in just a little, I'd be so grateful. That did it. He slipped me the information in stutters, 2-second flicker in the camera feed after the evening diagnostic reset. A blind spot. Barely a sliver of time. Barely enough. Perfect for me. I counted down the minutes until the system rolled over. The lights dimmed. The automated announcement droned something about night cycle protocols. Footsteps faded down the hallway. Then, now, I slipped into the hallway like a shadow, hugging the wall where the camera blinked off for a heartbeat and cut back on. If you weren't looking carefully, you'd miss the interruption. I didn't miss anything. Past the first corner. Past the second camera. Through the medical wing doors before they could lock. My pulse quickened with every step. But it wasn't panic this time. It was exhilaration. I was moving again. Out of the box they kept calling a room. Out of the cage they insisted wasn't a cage. 2 hallways down, I could almost taste the metallic tang of freedom. Left. Right. Another blind corner. Almost. Then I stopped dead. Rain was there. Waiting. Leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the world. Arms crossed. One ankle casually hooked over the other. Not surprised. Not angry. Just there. Like he knew exactly where I'd be, down to the second. My stomach dropped to my shoes. He lifted his head slowly, eyes catching the low hallway light. Cool steel. Annoyingly calm. And then he smiled. Not a smirk. Not the tight, polite version I'd seen when he tolerated my sarcasm. A real smile. Slow and sharp with something almost amused behind it. The kind of smile that said, I saw this coming the moment you stole the chocolate. You thought you could leave without saying goodbye? He asked. Goodbye. Not escape. Not flee. Not evade containment. Goodbye. My heart tripped over itself. I glared at him to hide the fact that my brain had short-circuited. I wasn't leaving. I was walking, fast, in a direction. Rain pushed off the wall, straightening to his full, unfair height. A direction that leads to restricted sectors and an exterior exit. That's just coincidence. Of course, he said, sounding entirely unconvinced. He took a step toward me. I took a step back. His smile didn't fade. If anything, it deepened, dangerously close to fond. And that was worse than being caught. Because my pulse didn't spike in fear. It spiked in something nauseatingly stupid. Heat. Rain stopped just a few feet away, hands still loose at his sides. Not threatening. Not intimidating. He didn't need to be. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go back. I swallowed, throat suddenly dry. Stop acting like this is a field trip. Then stop sneaking out like it is. My chest tightened. Rain, I said, struggling to get the words out past the embarrassment burning in my cheeks. Stop smiling. Why? Because it's unfair. Disarming. Doing things to me I didn't have names for. He waited. It's distracting, I muttered. This time, he didn't hide the soft huff of laughter. He turned, gesturing for me to follow. Like he'd known I would. And damn it, I did. If they were trying to break me psychologically, they were going about it in the weirdest possible way. No solitary confinement. No intimidation tactics. No shouting, threats, or punishments. Just him. Rain. Always perfectly composed. Always precisely where I least wanted him to be. Always watching me like I was a puzzle he'd already solved but enjoyed pretending was still challenging. It was infuriating. It was unsettling. It was a little addictive. Not that I'd say that out loud. Today, they had me doing cognitive tests, matching symbols, tracing patterns, answering timed prompts, things I usually blew through with zero effort. But Rain stood by the wall, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on me, like I was the only thing in the room worth paying attention to. I pretended not to notice. He pretended not to know that I noticed. We were both, very badly, pretending. I clicked the last tile into place and looked over my shoulder with exaggerated annoyance. You know, I said, staring that intensely at someone is legally considered harassment in at least 13 states. A pause. Rain blinked once. We're not in any of those states. I'm pretty sure state of psychological torture covers it. That isn't a real jurisdiction. Feels real to me. He didn't react. Not with a twitch. Not with a smirk. Not even with a sigh. I narrowed my eyes. Do you ever blink in emotion, or did they train that out of you in alpha kindergarten? A second blink. Deliberate this time. Slow. Which made me want to throw something at him. You're doing that on purpose, I accused. Blinking? You know what I mean. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Instead he studied me with that sharp, analytical stillness that should have been unnerving. Should have been. But all I could think was that his gaze never wandered, not to the monitors. Not to the door. Not to the medic taking notes across the room. Just me. Always me. Later, during a coordination test, he stood closer. Too close. Close enough that when he breathed, the air shifted along my skin. Close enough that his scent, cool, quiet, impossibly steady, cut through the sterilized air of the facility. My chest tightened. My pulse tripped. I made a show of rolling my eyes. You don't have to supervise me tying a rope, you know. I'm not going to use it to lasso my way out of here. He didn't look away from my hands. You attempted escape twice. Which means I'm learning. That's what tests are for. That noise again. A sound so small it shouldn't mean anything. But it hit harder than a whole paragraph. My fingers slipped. Stop doing that. What? That low, thing. I wasn't aware I did anything. You very much did. His lips twitched almost imperceptibly. Not a smile. Not yet. But close. And damn him for that. I dropped the rope. Why do you watch me like that? Like what? His voice was soft. Too soft. Like you know every thought I have, I said before I could stop myself. Like you're already 3 steps into a conversation we haven't had yet. Rain considered this. Truly considered it. Like my words were data to analyze, not a complaint. Observation is part of my work. That's not what you're doing, I shot back. A slow inhale. Barely visible. Barely audible. But you already know that, I added quieter. His gaze flicked away for the first time in days? Weeks? Time blurred here. You're perceptive. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It isn't. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It wasn't cold. It wasn't even uncomfortable. It was something else. Something suspended between us. Like a held breath neither of us wanted to release. I sat on the exam table, legs swinging like I owned the place. Rain stood nearby, arms relaxed at his sides, expression unreadable. You can just say it, you know, I said. Say whatever it is you're not saying. His head tilted slightly. A tiny gesture. But after spending so long studying him, yes, studying, I could admit that much now, I recognized it. Hesitation. I'm not withholding anything relevant to your safety, he said. That's a lie, and you know it. His jaw flexed. Just a little. Got him. The victory was small, but it sang through my chest in a way I didn't want to think about. I'll figure you out, I warned him, leaning forward. I don't care how much you hide behind your perfect posture and your expensive silence. It isn't a competition, he murmured. It is now. Something flashed in his eyes, half warning, half something warmer, something dangerously close to fondness. And for a moment the room felt too small. Not in a claustrophobic way. In a close way. A way that made my skin buzz with an awareness I couldn't shut off. Neither of us said anything else. Neither of us needed to. The closeness in the air said enough. Routine is the backbone of control. Same med bay. Same personnel. Same series of tests designed to measure the limits of an omega whose biology defied every known protocol. Except today, one thing would be different. Mr. Sam, Dr. Ishawe said, her voice carefully steady. I need you to remove your filter mask for the olfactory analysis. Sam froze. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just a small tightening in his shoulders, a flicker in his eyes that anyone else would have missed. But I didn't miss it. His fingers hovered near the straps of the mask. You sure about that? You remember what happened last time someone asked me to do that, right? Yes, she said. That's why we're prepared. Prepared was generous. No one was ever prepared for his scent. Not fully. But it needed to be done. Sam exhaled sharply, muttered something under his breath that sounded like, if you all pass out, I'm not carrying anyone. Then tugged the mask off. Everything changed. His scent hit the air like a shockwave, sweet, sharp, Volatile, the kind that could turn a disciplined alpha into a feral one in seconds. Invisible, but instantly everywhere. It threaded through the room, across the equipment, into every breath. The first guard stiffened. The second gasped. Sam flinched. "Hey, no, sit down if you're gonna..." Too late. Guard 1 swayed on his feet, pupils blown wide, chest heaving. A split second later, he collapsed like someone had cut his strings, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Guard 2 dropped to his knees, palms pressed to the ground, trembling. Sam stared at them, horror flashing across his face. "Damn it, this is why I didn't want..." He stopped. Because I hadn't moved. I stood exactly where I'd been, arms at my sides, posture straight, breathing unaltered. Sam's scent washed over me, invasive, intimate, designed to overwhelm every instinct I'd been engineered to control. It didn't. Instead, everything inside me sharpened, awareness, focus, even the cadence of my heartbeat settling into a cleaner rhythm. A resonance. Clear and unmistakable. Sam's eyes snapped to mine, wide and stunned. "You're still standing?" "Yes." "You're..." He gestured at the unconscious guard. "They're out. That guy is practically drooling. You should be..." "My physiological response is stable," I said quietly. He blinked fast, confusion twisting his expression. No, that's not possible. You should be reacting. You should be..." His voice thinned. "You should be on the floor." There it was. Fear. Not for himself. For everyone else. And for the first time since his capture, I saw something breaking through his armor of sarcasm and deflection. Vulnerability. I stepped toward him. Slowly. Carefully. So he could track every inch of my approach. He backed up a step, then stopped himself, jaw tightening. "Don't..." "I'm not going to touch you," I said gently. His breathing hitched. Not from pheromones. From disbelief. "This doesn't make sense," he whispered. "Why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you like them?" Because he was my pair. Because my biology had recognized him long before I permitted myself to acknowledge it. Because his scent didn't destabilize me. It aligned me. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I met his gaze, direct, steady, and let the truth that wouldn't destroy him be the one he heard. "Sam," I said, voice dropping low, anchoring. "I am the only one who can withstand you." The words landed between us with a weight that changed the air. Sam's lips parted, shock softening every line of his face. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't blinking. He was absorbing every syllable like they were rewriting the shape of his world. And maybe they were. Because in that room, filled with the unconscious and the trembling, only two people remained standing. Him. And me. Exactly as we were meant to. Rain's words from the med bay echoed in my skull long after they escorted me back to my room. "I am the only one who can withstand you." He said it like a simple fact. Like gravity. Like he wasn't casually rewriting the laws of my entire existence. I paced my room until the floor started to feel worn under my boots. My pulse wouldn't settle. My hands shook with leftover adrenaline and something worse. Something I refused to name. Finally I snapped. "Okay," I muttered, glaring at the closed door. "Fine. You want to play it quiet? Let's see how quiet you stay now." The camera in the corner watched me with its stupid unblinking eye. I marched right up to it. "Hey," I said sharply. "We're not done." Nothing. Not even a flicker of the tiny indicator light. I said we're not done. I shouted. Silence. I grabbed the nearest chair, spun, and hurled it. It smashed into the wall beneath the camera and clattered to the floor. Still nothing. "Rain," I yelled, heat rising in my throat. "Get in here." The intercom stayed dead. The door stayed sealed. No alarms, no guards, no reprimand. Just silence. That made it worse. Much, much worse. I turned back to the camera. "You said you're the only one who can handle me? Great. Then come handle me." The camera stared. I snapped. I climbed onto the bed and launched myself at the corner, grabbing the metal casing with both hands. I tore it half out of the wall, sparks spitting as the wires strained. The lens cracked under my thumb. I ripped the rest out with a scream that scraped my throat raw. The camera dangled, lifeless. My pulse thundered. "That's one." I whirled around, eyes locking on the small table where they kept diagnostic gear. I kicked it. Hard. It toppled. Monitors smashing against the floor in a chorus of breaking plastic. That's too. My hands trembled so violently I barely felt the pain when I grabbed the panel covering the wall's access console. I pried it open until metal bent in my grip. Sparks jumped, biting my knuckles. I reached in, grabbed a fistful of cables, and ripped them out. The lights flickered. The door stayed closed. My breath heaved in sharp, uneven bursts. Sweat slid down my temples. My entire body shook, not from effort but from the unbearable pressure sitting between my ribs. The pressure of not being heard. The pressure of being someone's mystery, instead of someone's priority. "Why aren't you angry?" I shouted at the ceiling, voice cracking. "Why aren't you reacting? Why aren't you?" I stopped. A glass panel flickered on, not in my room. Beyond it. Behind the one-way observation wall. He was there. Rain. Standing with his hands behind his back, posture perfect, eyes fixed on me. No guards, no backup, just him, watching. Calm. Unshaken. As if the wreckage around me didn't matter. As if I didn't matter. The room went painfully quiet. My breath's the only sound. His expression didn't soften. Didn't harden. Didn't change at all. He didn't move toward the door. He didn't speak through the intercom. He didn't chastise me, or call for sedatives. He simply watched. Like he was waiting for me to peel back another layer. Like he knew I would crumble if he pressed even a little. Like silence was the leash he held around my throat. "You don't get to stand there and say nothing," I said, my voice breaking. "Not after what you told me." Rain's eyes narrowed by a fraction enough for me to catch it. "You owe me an explanation," I whispered, stepping closer to the glass as if I could reach him. "You owe me something, anything." He didn't reply. I slammed my palm against the glass. "Say something." Nothing. Pain knotted in my chest. A choking, twisting thing that tasted too much like betrayal and too much like need. "Don't you get it?" I hissed. "It's not the walls that make me feel trapped." Rain's gaze didn't waver. "It's you." Silence thickened. Heavy, suffocating, intimate. His restraint, his distance, his refusal to answer. They held me tighter than any locked door. And I hated it. I hated him. I hated how my body reacted to the quiet hum of his presence. I hated how my mind spun trying to decode every flicker in his expression. I hated that he didn't have to raise his voice or his hand to cage me. He just stood there. Still, silent, certain. I pressed my forehead to the glass, breath ragged. "This isn't an answer," I whispered. His voice came through at last. Soft, low, steady. "No," Rain said. "It isn't." And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. Provocation is a language Sam speaks fluently. I should have anticipated the next escalation. I should have known he wouldn't let my silence from the observation room stand. I should have prepared for it. But even with all my training, all my conditioning, all my perfectly constructed walls, I wasn't prepared for him. The medbay was empty when I stepped in. Sam stood in the center of the room, his posture unnaturally still. Eyes fixed on me with a clarity that made the air hum between us. The door slid shut behind me. He didn't flinch. "You're early," he said, voice low and steady. "You triggered an alert," I replied. "Good." His lips curved up in a sharp, dangerous smile. "I wanted your attention." He got it. I had been giving him my attention long before he learned how to demand it. He took a single step closer. The fluorescent lights carved harsh shadows along his jaw. His eyes, storm gray and too alive, held no fear this time. "Only challenge. Since you won't answer my questions," he said softly. "How about we try this another way?" His shoulders relaxed. His pulse quickened, not in panic, but in something else, something reckless. "Sam?" He didn't let me finish. Heat flared in the space between us. Not literal heat. Not visible. But unmistakable. A sudden, sharp spike of pheromones so intense it made the monitors flicker. The scent hit my senses like a wave, bright, overwhelming, engineered by his biology to break alphas, to drag them under instinct until they drowned. Any other alpha would have collapsed, lost themselves, gone feral. But I stepped forward, not to dominate, not to counter, not to assert myself, but because he looked like he needed someone to catch him if the world tilted. His eyes widened, just slightly. He hadn't expected that. He took a step back, barely half a foot. But enough. For the first time since I captured him, his confidence wavered. Don't, he breathed. The word more instinct than command. Don't come closer. I paused. Not because I feared him, but because I didn't want him to mistake my approach for the wrong instinct. You're not losing control, he said, almost accusing. Why aren't you reacting? I took another careful step, slow enough that he could track every inch, slow enough not to corner him. I am reacting, I said, voice low, quiet. Just not the way you expect. His throat bobbed on a swallow. The pheromones wavered. His breath stuttered, barely audible. Stop doing that, he said. Stop looking at me like what? I asked. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His bravado cracked, the spike of pheromones fractured into confusion and something dangerously close to vulnerability. I closed the distance by one more step. Close enough for him to feel my steadiness. Close enough for me to feel his uncertainty. Close enough that our breaths mingled at the edges. Sam, I said quietly. You're trying to test me with something that doesn't define us. His eyes snapped up to mine. Doesn't define? My scent is the only thing anyone's ever cared about. Not me. He blinked, stunned. I forced myself to speak carefully, choosing each word like it was a blade that could cut us both. You don't understand, I whispered. What ties us together isn't pheromones, it's... I stopped. Too close. Too honest. Too dangerous. Sam's entire body leaned in, just a fraction, drawn to the truth I hadn't meant to let slip. What? He whispered. It's what? I exhaled, slow and silent, and stepped back. The resonance between us strained. An invisible tether pulled taut, protesting the distance. But I couldn't finish the sentence. Not yet. Not until he was ready to hear the truth. And not until I was ready to say it. Your tests are complete for today, I said, returning my voice to its practiced calm. Return to your room. Sam stared at me, chest rising and falling too quickly, conflict burning behind his eyes. He'd wanted to break me. He succeeded in breaking something else instead. My silence. My restraint. My distance. And as he walked past me, his shoulder brushing the air near mine, the resonance hummed under my skin like a warning. If I took one more step toward him, I wouldn't be able to stop. One thing they never taught me in all my years of running. What to do when you stop. Because when you stop, you start noticing things. Patterns. Holes. Weak spots. And sometimes, even locked doors left just a little bit too loose. It started with a glitch on one of the wall monitors, a momentary flicker as the med tech updated system logs. He left in a rush, some emergency in another wing, and forgot to log out fully. The screen dimmed. Half closed, but not locked. Not enough to invite trouble maybe. Just enough to tempt me. I shouldn't have checked. I knew that. But I've never been good at resisting bad decisions. The interface was standard government layout, encrypted folders, coded. Data points, layers of protection meant to keep curious people out. Except one file wasn't labeled like the others. Pair, classified. My chest tightened. My fingers hovered. Then moved. The file opened with no prompt. Like it recognized me. A list appeared, short, only 3 entries. 2 names I didn't know. And the third one. Samuel Rove, pending status, match identified. Pair, Director Rains. My vision blurred. My stomach dropped. My heart didn't just skip, it reeled. Like the whole world had shifted under me. Pair, pair, pair. My name attached to his like we were 2 parts of the same weapon. Like I wasn't a prisoner, but a possession, a designation, a biological inevitability. And he knew. He knew from the moment he saw me. From the moment he smelled me. From the moment he said bring him to me like he already had a claim. My hands shook over the console. My throat closed. You, son of a... A noise behind me cut the thought off. I spun. Rain stood at the entrance. Calm. Still. Watching me with that same steady gaze that now felt like a trap. He didn't rush forward. He didn't bark an order. He just existed. Quietly. Powerfully, like a storm that didn't need to roar to be lethal. The file was still open behind me. His eyes drifted to it. Then to me. He didn't deny it. Good. Because I would have ripped him apart if he tried. You knew, I said. My voice raw, jagged. Yes. You knew from the first day. Yes. Before I woke up. Before I even spoke. Yes. Rage tore through me, fast and hot. A kind of rage that wasn't anger, but betrayal. Something deeper. Something that scraped bone. "And you said nothing?" I shouted. "You kept me here, tested me, watched me. While you already knew." "If I had told you," Rain said quietly, "you would have run." "Yes," I snapped. "I still can." The last words ripped out of me with more truth than I meant to reveal. My breath shook. My heart hammered in my chest like it was trying to break free. I backed up, stumbling until I hit the edge of the desk. Rain didn't move. He didn't defend himself. He didn't explain. He didn't say anything to soothe me. He just stood there, accepting the blow, silent under my fury. That made it worse. "Why didn't you say anything?" I demanded. "Why didn't you tell me what I am to you?" His jaw tightened by a fraction. The only crack in his entire facade. "Because," he said, voice low, "if I spoke it out loud, it would become real. And I wasn't sure you were ready for that." I laughed, bitter and hysterical. Ready for what? Ready to be trapped, tagged, catalogued like some pair bond experiment? His eyes didn't soften. They got sharper. "Ready," he said. "To stop running." My breath caught. He stepped forward. Just one step. But the air shifted like he'd moved the entire room. I pushed off the desk, intending to bolt. I could outrun him. I had before. I could do it again. One step. Just one. But my legs, they didn't move. Not because he was stopping me. Not because of his scent or command or pheromones or any alpha instinct. Because of something far more terrifying. I realized I didn't want to run. Not from him, not from this. Not from the one person who didn't fear me. Who never had. Who looked at me like I wasn't broken. My chest ached. Rain's voice dropped. Softer than I'd ever heard it. "Sam." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Don't," I whispered. Because if he said one more word, if he stepped 1 inch closer, there would be no more running left in me, and that truth hurt more than any cage ever could. "Sam, running is muscle memory. Running is instinct. Running is survival. Even when everything inside you screams don't." I sprinted down the corridor. Heart hammering, breath sharp in my lungs. The facility was in low-power night cycle, lights dimmed to a soft blue glow that made every corner look like an escape route. I'd memorized the guard rotations days ago. And after reading that file, the one that chained my name to his, I couldn't breathe inside these walls. Door 1, bypassed with the stolen code. Door 2, jammed open with a wedge of broken panel. Door 3, tricked with a false alarm in another wing. Every step burned. Every corner felt too bright. Every breath carried the metallic taste of betrayal lodged in my throat. I wasn't running from the facility. I was running from the truth. The last hallway opened in front of me. The one that led to the exterior. Airlock. The final barrier between this place and the night. I was so close. 5 more steps. 4. 3. "Sam." I froze. His voice wasn't loud. Wasn't commanding. Wasn't anything I could fight. I turned. Rain stood between me and freedom. Not blocking the door. Not reaching for me. Just standing there. Breathing quietly, eyes steady in the dim blue light. He looked tired. Not physically. Something deeper. My chest twisted painfully. "Move," I said, hating how raw my voice sounded. He didn't. Rain. I knew he'd run. Not because he hated this place. But because he finally understood what bound us. He was shaking. Not with fear. With fury. With heartbreak. And he looked at me like I'd become the cage he feared most. "Sam," I said softly, "I'm not here to stop you." He didn't believe me. His jaw clenched. "Then step aside." I didn't. Not because I wanted to hold him here. Because I needed him to hear me without running first. "You have every reason to be angry," I said. "Every reason to break things. Every reason to break me." His breath hitched. "But you're wrong about one thing." He blinked fast. "Oh, this should be good. I never kept you here to lock you away." His hands curled into fists. I took a breath, the words heavy in my chest, heavier than any command I'd ever given. "I didn't hold you in a cage," I said quietly. "I held you close. Because only next to me do you stop burning the world down with your fear." The silence that followed was a living thing. Sam stared at me, as if I'd punched the air out of his lungs, as if he didn't know whether to scream or break. Then his face crumpled. Just a little. Just enough to shatter me. Sam! I hadn't cried in years. Didn't have time for it. Didn't have space for it. Didn't have anyone to hold the pieces if I did. But Rain's words cracked something under my ribs I didn't know I'd been holding together. Held me close. Close. Not trapped. Not owned. Not controlled. Close. My vision blurred. A sob punched out of me, ugly and sudden. I covered my face, choking on it, but it didn't stop. The tears kept coming, hot and violent, as if years of running, hiding, fighting, denying, all of it finally caught me. I hate you, I gasped, voice breaking. I hate that you make this feel safe. Rain didn't move. Not until I took one small broken step toward him. Then he closed the distance. Not to grab me. Not to restrain me. But to lift one hand, slowly, carefully, and touch his fingers to my wrist. Barely a brush. Barely contact at all. But the moment his skin met mine, my knees nearly buckled. The walls I'd built for years. The walls running had held together. Split down the center. Terror. Relief. Recognition. All tangled. All overwhelming. His thumb rested lightly over my pulse. You can run, he whispered. You always can. I won't take that from you. I sobbed once more, sharp, broken. But you don't want to. And for the first time in my life, I didn't run. For the first time in my life, I didn't wake up planning an escape route or measuring the distance to the nearest door. I didn't check the vents. I didn't test the locks. I didn't pace like a caged animal waiting for the next shock to hit. I just stayed. Voluntarily. The next morning, the medbay smelled the same. Disinfectant and humming machines. But something in me felt different. Steadier than it had any right to be. The staff gathered for the usual tests. Monitors, scanners, sterile gloves. I walked in without being escorted. Dr. Ishiwa blinked at me. Sam? Where is your guard? I shrugged. Don't need one. Her eyes widened. Director Rain said. I know what he said. I lifted my chin. Felt the strange weightlessness of this new choice. I'm not an object in containment anymore. I waited for the tremor in my chest, for the old instincts to kick in, for the walls to start closing around me. They didn't. I'm an active participant, I said, tasting the words like something unfamiliar but not unpleasant. In whatever this is. In whatever we're doing. The techs looked at each other. The guard at the door almost dropped his tablet. Dr. Ishiwa pressed a hand to her chest like she'd forgotten how to breathe. I almost laughed. I'd spent my life being treated like a walking hazard sign. And now they were looking at me like I'd turned into a whole person. A door slid open behind me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. His presence settled the room before his footsteps did. Rain walked in without his usual armor of quiet detachment. Still controlled, still steady. But something softer traced the lines of his posture. He stopped beside me, just close enough that his sleeve brushed mine. Sam, he said. And somehow my name sounded different now. Warmer. Lighter. Like a promise, not a warning. I didn't run. I didn't recoil. I met his gaze. I told them, I said, nodding to the staff, that I'm staying. On my own. For a fraction of a beat, something in Rain's face broke open. Not his control, not his authority. His silence. And beneath it, a smile. Not the ghost of one. A real one. Bright. Honest. Unmistakably his. It hit me harder than any pheromone ever could. Dr. Ishiwa made a tiny startled sound, like she'd just witnessed a solar eclipse. Rain didn't take his eyes off me. Good, he said quietly. Then we move forward together. Together. The word landed in my chest and settled there, warm and terrifying and strangely right. Not because of instinct. Not because the universe decided to bind us before we'd ever met. Not because I was forced. But because he was the first person who didn't treat me like a weapon. Because he was the first person who didn't crumble under my scent, or break under my fear, or try to shape me into what he needed. He stood beside me, steady, constant, waiting for me to decide who I wanted to be. And for once, I wanted to be here, with him. Later, standing at the observation window overlooking the city outside, the first real view I'd had in weeks, I let the weight of it all settle. The skyline glowed in the distance. Lights flickered, cars moved like veins of fire through the dark. And Rain stood beside me, silent, not trapping me, not claiming me, just there. My chest loosened, My breath steadied. I spoke without looking at him, because looking at him meant feeling too much, too fast. I always thought freedom was something I had to steal, I said. Something I had to take from someone else. A door I had to break through. Rain didn't answer. He didn't need to. I finally turned to him, felt that tether between us hum, soft and sure. But it turns out, my voice cracked, just a little. Freedom is the person you don't want to run from. His gaze softened, truly softened for the first time. I swallowed, stepped closer. And I don't want to run anymore. Not from him, not from myself, not from the future that, for the first time, didn't feel like a chase. Freedom, I whispered, is the person I choose to walk beside. And this time, I wasn't running.